Now we can start.
When the chairman moved it just so I could be here,
You better. You.
I presented it in the whip meeting. I said, I got to go.
Thank you. We got. Let's get this thing going. Thank you. Hold on. Let me see what I got to do first. You ready? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and for the record, I want to note that we do have a quorum today, and I want to thank the members for being here and our guests as well. And we have two little bills that we want to knock out before the presentation, and I thank Chairman Ridley. Well, before we do that, we need to do a prayer, and Representative Mathis, what number are you? 26. We'll get you to lead us off in prayer. Thank you.
All right, let us pray. Father, we thank you this day. We thank you the folks that are here. We ask you to bless all their families. We ask that the decisions we make here will help folks and be in your will. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Danny. Thank you for that. Okay, Chairman Ridley, you've got the floor.
All right. Well, thank y'all. Good morning. There's nothing like starting a Monday morning off with a good beauty pageant bill. And there's nobody better than me to carry a beauty pageant bill because it just shows you you can be anything you want to in life, kids. I got House Bill 507, LC 510273. We had this bill last year and it's not changed any. And it passed the House 166-8. The good news is 6 of the 8 that voted against it's not in the House anymore. So I'm looking for a better outcome this year. All that's doing, this came last year. We've had some parents and some little associations, whenever they advertise things on Facebook, like these beauty pageants, it don't have an email address, it don't have a website that they could go to, and so it's just been a little bit aggravating, and I think some people's kind of got ripped off on some things. So this is kind of the first step. Representative Kendrick and her was talking earlier, and she said, well, you know, what's the teeth in this thing? And I don't think they want to put any right now. I think they're just wanting to require people to put an internet, put the website and an email address on there and just kind of see how that goes. So that's all the bill really does. And you can see on line 17 and 19 and line 13 and 14, that's the only thing it's doing is inserting website and email address. And I'd be happy for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing the bill. And I think it's a good bill. My question is going to be to the chairman of the committee. I want to question the germaneness of the author of the bill with beauty. Can I get a ruling on that?
I could win that. You know, they have that ugliest dog contest. I think I could win the ugliest human contest if we.
But I'm not going to rule on the germaneness of the presenter and the title of the bill. All right. Thank you, John. Number 18.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for bringing this bill. It's enlightening. The question I have, though, these are for contestants, individuals who are going to participate in the pageants.
This is actually for the people that's holding the promoters.
The promoters.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question was going to be, what if they didn't have a website? Would they be able to complete this application and leave that blank? We know they have an email, but
sure.
Hopefully
Well,
they have
so
a
if you're,
website,
I mean, I guess I guess that's kind of part of the problem, because I could say that I'm holding a beauty pageant, I get your money, and then nothing ever happens, and that's some of the complaints that we've had. So this is just kind of make them show a little more legitimacy about their, if they advertise on Facebook, that they do have a website, they do have an email address, phone number, which is already required on there. So that's kind of where this came from.
And just for clarity for me, so if they do not have a website, so if they don't have a website, then they would not be able to accept any money or anything like that. Okay,
That's right now. It's just yes, and there's like we was talking about. There's no teeth in it really. It's just one more requirement that we're trying to do before we start.
I can't decide. I'm gonna host the pageant.
That's yes, yeah, that's right.
Cool. All right, there are no more questions. What's the pleasure of the committee? Motion and a second, okay. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I think it's time to vote. All those in favor of LC 510273, receiving the due pass recommendation, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign? Congratulations.
Well, thank y'all.
You got the bill. You
All
didn't
the
get
little girls
beauty.
up there and boys, thank y'all for everything.
Thank you, Representative Ridley. All right. Representative Mathis, so you're up. Have you got the order from our president?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We go from a beauty pageant to a funeral, so that's a little ironic this morning, isn't it? I tell you. This bill I'm bringing today is House Bill 498, and I'm reading off LC 365421. This bill was brought last year. It passed the Senate, passed the House, the governor signed it, then the Attorney General's office realized that it was just reinstating those going forward, not going backwards. So we just got to fix it. What it is reinstating a lapsed funeral director's license. And they will be paying the fees and the penalties. And if they need to continue, if they need continuing education, they have to meet those criteria too. At a certain age, you don't have to. When you get old as I am, they figure if you don't know by now, you're not going to know. So that's what the bill is. It's just reinstating some funeral directors that, for whatever reason, within 10 years have let their license lapse. And with the shortage in workforce and needs for this, I think it's a good bill. Representative Matt Gamble brought it last year, and so that's what we're doing, reintroducing it with the corrections, so it will be from 10 years back up if you meet the criteria. And that's it, Mr. Chairman. I take any questions.
All right, thank you, Representative. Are there any questions? Number 25.
At the proper time, I move that we do pass.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions?
I second that.
This is the proper time.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I move we pass, House Bill 498.
Cool. There's a motion. Second. And a second. All right, any further discussion? You do have a question? Okay, what number? Number 1.
Does this have the endorsement of the Funeral Home Caucus?
Yes. If you'll notice, one of the signers was the Strawberry Queen, Patty Bentley. Yeah, it sure does. Very, very much so.
Good.
That's it.
That's it. All right, very good. Now that we've got the endorsement of the Strawberry Queen, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote on this. All those in favor of passing or receiving the due pass recommendation LC 365421, House Bill 498, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign? Fantastic. Representative Mathis, congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
All right, well, super. We got our business taken care of. Now let's move on. Okay, Ben, it looks like you're the first one up. So if you would come and make a brief presentation and then, of course, introduce your guest.
I believe all of you have a couple handouts that we provided, but thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for having us today. I'm Ben Cowart, Vice President of Government Affairs at Georgia Retailers. And I have with me Shaquille Allen, that's Organized Crime Retail Manager at Kroger. So Georgia Retailers is a trade association that represents over 134,000 retail locations, both large and small, statewide. Since 1961, Georgia Retailers has protected Georgia's retail industry from unreasonable taxes, fees, and regulation. We work to secure the passage of retail-friendly legislation that have a major bottom-line impact on retail stores. So I do want to mention 2 pieces of legislation we are working on this year that I hope you'll have a chance to vote in support of. The first is House Bill 416 by Representative Deborah Silcox. This legislation is supported by Georgia Retailers, Georgia Food Industry Association, and Georgia Pharmacy Association. It allows pharmacy technicians to administer certain vaccinations to persons 18 years of age and older, and includes training requirements currently required under the Public Readiness Emergency Preparedness Act, which is the PrEP Act. During the pandemic, under the PrEP Act, pharmacy technicians were given this authorization to administer these vaccines, and that temporary authority is set to expire after the public health emergency expires May 11th, 2023. The other is Senate Bill 126 by Senator Billy Hickman. This legislation is supported by a coalition of businesses and associations. So when consumers buy a product and they use a credit card to pay for it, retailers pay a fee to the processors, which we call swipe fees. And the retailers understand the swipe fees are part of doing business, but the fee is paid not only on just the product that is bought, but also on the state-imposed taxes that the retailer must collect and submit to the state. So this legislation would just prohibit card networks from charging swipe fees on any amount other than the base purchase price of goods and services, thereby barring swipe fees on sales and excise taxes. And I'm happy to talk with any of you further about either piece of legislation after the presentation. So Georgia Retailers works in partnership with the Georgia Retail Organized Crime Alliance, or GROC, to improve retailing in Georgia by providing guidance to its members and law enforcement partners in education, professional networking, legislative initiatives, and community outreach. Georgia Retailers works with GROC to put on the GROC Retail Crime Conference each year. This is an annual conference that brings together 400 to 500 law enforcement and retail security professionals for a full day of networking and training to combat organized retail crime groups that negatively impact the security and safety of the communities we do business in. So they also partner with the Criminal Justice Department of Kennesaw State University to provide scholarships to students interested in a career in retail loss prevention. And GROC holds various organized retail crime training for law enforcement jurisdictions and leads meetings where retailers and law enforcement partners discuss organized retail crime impacts. So as I mentioned, today I have with me Shaquille Allen, organized retail crime manager at Kroger. Shaquille is a former APD officer and very involved with with GROC. And I'll turn it over to Shaquille.
Good morning. So like Ben said, I worked with the Atlanta Police Department for 9 years prior to coming over to Kroger. Actually, it's been 2 years since I've been with Kroger today. Before leaving APD, I got my first taste of ORC working at the mall, working in Zone 2. To most police officers, I think it comes across as just petty theft, right? But I was introduced to it by loss prevention manager at Louis Vuitton. Kind of opened my eyes to a different world of how these groups sell items, how they have lists, and how they target certain stores in certain areas that they will commit these thefts. And that kind of opened my eyes to it. I became very involved with GROC from that point on. And the partnership is the most important thing with GROC and with all the stakeholders involved, the community, the police, and the retailers. It's important to have this type of partnership. This is the only way that we could effectively combat ORC. So one of the biggest things that we've been faced with in retail is, since the pandemic, is masks and the lack of workforce. All right. So most of the cameras set up in our stores are not set up exactly to combat theft, right? They're for slip and falls and things of that nature, and offenders use that to their advantage. They know if they wear masks, if they wear hoods, and the lack of associates that we have on the floor at the time, it makes it much easier for them to commit these thefts. And then on the flip side of that, the law enforcement piece, even law enforcement have felt the impacts of shortage, lack of employees now that a lot of officers have left, I guess like myself. there's not that many people to respond to those crimes and investigate those crimes. The lack of leads that we have based on our camera footage or other factors that come into play in the retail environment, it makes that very challenging without partnerships like G-Rock to share information back and forth and work with all of our retail partners for a common goal in reducing ORC. So one of the biggest things, I guess, to talk about with ORC is that Atlanta has always been in the top 10 since I found out about it. One of the major cities, and one of the biggest difference between us and the other cities on that list is we do not have a ORC task force in the state of Georgia. We do have ORC laws on the books, but what I know, I haven't ever seen any of those be charged. Those investigations take a lot of man hours, and most police departments just do not have the resources to sustain a long investigation that it takes to bring down ORC rings most of the time. There's a gap between, and the federal law enforcement agencies like HSI, they have an operation called Bowling Point where they are combating ORC, but the thresholds between what the state will take versus what the federal government will take, usually there's a big gap in between where most of the ORC cases fall, and they pretty much just remain in limbo where the cases aren't being worked outside of small isolated incidents. So. And then ORC, most of the time it's kind of looked at as like a victimless crime, but the cost of that is reflected on all of us. The retailers do not eat those costs. They push it back on us, right? So that is a challenge, why it's important to all of us to have a hand in ORC, right? And then I think that's it. That's all.
There's several charts that are in your handout that kind of shows retail crime over the last decade, and then where Atlanta is ranked in those. And we're happy to answer any questions that you have about ORC or toward retailers.
Yeah, well, we've got a bunch of questions. The board is lit up, but I'm going to take the opportunity to say two things. Number one, it's not a victimless crime. If a retailer in any way tries to interfere, then it becomes violent.
Mm-hmm.
Number one. And number two, I want to hear what y'all want to recommend that we can do as a state to reduce retail crime. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. Who's number one? Carter? Representative? Who? I'm sorry. I meant number one on the list.
I'm number one. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. Thank you. This was enlightening. So I only have two questions. One, is the organized crimes that you all seeing, is it mostly near malls or the most populated areas? And two, I'm looking at the chart and I see Atlanta is in the top 10. However, we've come further from the top. So is there something that is that has been done in Atlanta over the last few years that took us from number 6 to 9?
I would say reporting is huge on that. Some stores, they've developed a policy where they won't report certain crimes, so they just, because of the response that they're getting from law enforcement. And then also that a partnership that they're working with their local agency may ask them to only report if they have certain factors. So that is one possibility. And your first question, I'm sorry.
Oh, is it mostly like in high-end malls, or is just any where are you really seeing the organized crime? 'Cause we hear about Phipps and Lenox. I wonder if it's perimeter, Cumberland. Is it mall specific or?
It's pretty much based off of their experience. If they go to an area and they realize that there's not associates on the floor, or there's a slow response time from law enforcement, they'll go back to that area. That would be a fishing hole for them. But pretty much is based off of their experience. I know Cumberland with Cobb PD, we just had a meeting with them where they're trying to do more enforcement at Cumberland Mall, so they're definitely seeing an uptick out there. But it's hard to put it on one exact area, but areas where there's a lot of retail locations like outlets, a lot of Walmarts or Kroger's in a close cluster close to the highway where it's easier to escape. That is typically the areas that they will target, and slow police response time.
All right, who's number one?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that presentation. I'm interested in the fencing operation because I think the easiest way is to cut off the demand on the receiving side. So how are they converting these goods into cash? Are they open, or is there some dark web stuff going on? How are they converting it to cash?
That's a very good question. So online marketplace is usually the best or easiest way to do it because it's very difficult to tell which product this may belong to, which store retailer may belong to. Brick and mortar is kind of a thing of the past. Now most of the ORC fencing operations are kind of done through Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp, eBay, things like that, where it's easier to hide your identity, conceal who you are, how you're getting those goods. Amazon is doing some efforts to try to combat that as well. They just hired a whole team of ORC investigators, but that is a huge issue. Like I spoke to about the police involvement, getting to work that angle of it, like you said, cut it off. But those investigations take a very long time because they do appear to be legitimate businesses, and it's kind of hard to tell unless you have a lengthy investigation to show how they're sourcing these products. But one of the telltale signs is that they are selling the product cheaper than what the retailer could purchase it for. But we need certain things, certain law enforcement resources to kind of take those cases to the next level.
Thank you. Okay, Representative Colbert, Chairman Colbert, number 12.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. Very informative. My question on the other crimes they commit, gas pump skimming, is that where they put a reader on there and steal your credit card? Is that what we're referring to there?
Yes, they also will steal fuel. So they have vehicles that will go over the tank where the fuel is stored, and they will pump out like hundreds of gallons of diesel fuel. That's typically groups that are coming up from Florida, but we are seeing a lot more of that in Georgia recently. But that is something that is going on right now as well.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, Martinez, number 28.
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation. My question to you is, you're with Kroger, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is Kroger doing? What's the private industry doing to avoid these crimes, these petty crimes? And I'll give you an example. My local Walmart, when I was a city official, a lot of folks were just stealing $15, just little dumb items. And what would happen is that they will call the city and they'll take my officer an hour, off the beat to do these paperwork. So finally we got with Walmart and said, look, you're taking an officer off the beat for about an hour to be in this Walmart to do the paperwork. So what can you guys do about it? So they really ramped up their security. They had they hired somebody at the door. They added some extra cameras, and their petty crime, $25, $15, all those crimes went down a lot because they took a proactive event. So what's Kroger doing? What's the retailers doing to help these crimes, these little petty crimes out?
Kind of all the things that you just explained. Like you said, customer service is the biggest deterrent on most of these type of petty crimes or for the petty crimes like you just talked about. But for ORC groups, the people that are determined to steal, they're not typically deterred by the customer service, the extra engagement at the front door. Technology is the biggest thing that we've invested in this year with better cameras, and we're exploring facial recognition or in the West Coast. So things like that where we're not calling to get that beat officer off for that $15 theft, but when we have a bigger set of incidents compiled, then we could bring that case to law enforcement, a detective versus a beat officer. I understand from, prior law enforcement, we want to keep officers on the street for more important calls, violent calls, calls for service like that. So that's one of the things that I stress to the store managers that I meet with is that we don't want to call if we don't have enough to prosecute, and we don't want to call if we don't have the video and everything burned for that officer so he's not out of service for, 45 minutes to an hour while you type a report. So that's just a kind of a training piece that we always have to go over with the store team to let them know that when we call, we want it to be valuable for both ends, because if officers come out to your point, and every time it's something small or we don't have all our documents in order, they will want to come to our store. They'll code to the calls where they know that everything is in order for them when they get there. So that's I guess it's a challenge, because the store leaders are looking at it as this is strength, this is bringing down their store performance, but we also have to juggle that partnership between our local agencies and that store. So
Cool. Okay. Number 19.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, and thank you for your presentation. I know that we're concentrating mainly on establishments, but can you tell us what the consumer should be alerted for and look for? Because we're getting hit also. I can't tell you how many times I've had to go to my bank to change my card.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So things like they said, the skimmers, check the terminal. If it's loose, that's a red flag. You shouldn't use that terminal, notify someone. People, it's not really a job for the retailer, but selecting items like large carts full of Tide, if you're at Kroger or a grocery store, things like that would kind of be alarming to you. But really, for most consumers, would be shopping on marketplaces, right? You're looking at items that are drastically lower, and not just because we want you to purchase at Kroger, but the way that they store those items after they are taken may be unsafe for you to consume. There's been times where we went into houses and the OTC, the over-the-counter medicine, is stored in like wet or damp places, or they're stored too hot. They're kept in trunks for days at a time. So that may affect the quality of the OTC that you're receiving. So you just want to be careful about where you're purchasing those items from if you're shopping on the marketplace. And then if you receive items like for Kroger, we mark some of our over-the-counter medicine with a if found label. That's a red flag. If you purchase an item online and it's marked by one of those labels from another retailer, that is a sign that it may have been sourced through ORC.
Cool. Who's next? Okay, number 29? No, 27? 25.
One question.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation as well. On the reported verbal threats to associates, I noticed that was up almost 90%, but is that in writing? Is that in person? Is that over the phone? Or, I know a verbal threat's a verbal threat, but just trying to get clear.
I would assume that that's usually when they're trying to stop the suspect.
Yes.
When they're exiting the store. Coming from law enforcement, I'm kind of used to those kind of interactions, but we don't expect our store associates to be, and that's really what it is. When the associates are engaging with these subjects, they usually become extremely combative. Mm-hmm. I believe it was in North Carolina, a Home Depot associate was killed by a person, an ORC subject, an elderly male. He was pushed to the floor, and he later died of those injuries. So we just started to see more violence to complete the theft. Usually it would just be threats of violence, but even when they are engaged by a store associate, it doesn't deter them, and they usually become extremely violent before they leave the store.
Thank you.
Great, okay. Who's next? Okay, number 25, Brother Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This probably doesn't so much deal with Kroger, but we've seen in the news, especially on the West Coast, an increase of smash and grab, and that's being a retailer myself, and certainly higher end products, that seems to be a problem there. Is that a problem in Georgia that y'all are seeing right now?
A few years ago, it was a really big issue, but recently I've seen more of that focus towards pharmacies and small convenience stores, usually targeting cigarettes and prescription pills like narcotics and things like that. But for grocery stores, typically, since I've been here, we haven't had any. Years ago, we had a lot of smash and grabs for blue jeans. They were called Blue Jean Bandits, but most of them have been arrested or still in jail, still working through those charges from years ago. But I haven't seen a huge uptick of the smash and grab burglaries in Georgia.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand you touched on a little bit about the Amazon issue. I want you to know I went around riding with an employee to find out and to actually see how well organized they are. It's almost like a factory that as soon as the trucks come out, they're pulling over to the side of the road at different locations. They're picking out products, and then they're putting them in personal cars and going back and resell them. This is a real problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super. All right. You've exhausted the questions, which is good. But I've got a couple of things that are food for thought, and I'd like to get with you after this meeting. We don't have enough time. But some of the things that concerns me about retail theft is, are the district attorneys taking this seriously? Are they prosecuting? In many cases, I've heard that it's a revolving door. They take them downtown. They assume that it's victimless when it's not, and then they just let them go. The second thing is the sentencing. Once they've been incarcerated, I had a personal experience just a few weeks ago where we apprehended someone for stealing. It was internal theft, and the police officer gave them a ticket to appear in court and pay a fine, which was much less than what they had stolen. The third thing that I think is food for thought as well is acceptance. We as a society apparently have become a little bit more tolerant for this bad behavior. And I've overheard conversations about people bragging how they were able to take advantage of some, business. And then the organization. They don't just come in and do it as an individual. They have people outside with cell phones. They monitor. They pay attention to what's going on. In many cases, they have several people with cell phones, knowing where the police are, and then knowing the hours and the operation and who's on duty and when they're lax. They check this out. It's extremely well organized and well thought out. And then the last thing is the motive. And in many cases, it's not just money. They're doing this so that they can get the money to buy drugs. And I would like for you to, talk to us maybe after this meeting, and let's come to something that we as a body can do to assist you. From what I understand, nationwide, we're looking at $100 billion annually in losses, and we as consumers are the ones paying it. So thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. All right, well, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hunter, you're up, big guy. And Allison, thank you. Y'all been so patient.
Very interesting.
Jason back to go to the catwalk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Hunter Loggins. I'm with the National Federation of Independent Business. We are a member-driven organization, one member, one vote. So if you see our logo or you see me talking on an issue, you know it's important. We have over 6,500 members in Georgia, some of whom are on this distinguished committee, ranging from our small agribusinesses and farms to our jewelers to manufacturers of industrial equipment. But one of the more important ones, especially during this season, are our public accountants. And with me today is Allison Couch. She is the owner and operator of Ignite Accounting and Business Advisors. She's also a county commissioner in Columbia County in District 4. And I'm going to turn it over to her to give you a brief presentation on a very important issue for our members.
Good morning. So I do have a little bit of a unique background on this topic of tangible personal property tax, and in that I have been practicing public accounting for almost 20 years and have been preparing tangible personal property tax returns for that entire time. I've been a small business owner myself for about 10 years and have been submitting personal property tax during that time as well. I am a relatively newly elected county commissioner, but that does give me perspective in the sense that the counties are who are collecting this tax, so I can kind of see it from both ends. I will say that this is the #1 griped about tax from all of my clients that there is, above income tax. So this is very burdensome on them in the sense that they feel that they are just being taxed every year on the same asset over and over. So it's a very repetitive tax. It is one that, like I said, you're taxed on this table every single year if it's still in your possession at January 1st. Throughout our state, we have some inconsistent reporting going on with this tax in the sense that the different counties some counties are very good about ensuring that their business owners are reporting and submitting this tax, Columbia County being one of them. Where my business sits, I'm sort of at one end of Columbia County, so I have a lot of clients in McDuffie County, Richmond County, and they're a lot more lackadaisical on this tax. So there's a lot of inconsistent reporting going on. Currently, the threshold is $7,500, and by that I mean if your assets total up to $7,500 or less, then you do not pay tax on them. I believe that threshold is outdated. I cannot find where that threshold was put into place, but I know it's been there at least 20 years. I believe that there's a need to bring that threshold up, even if it was for just looking back at inflation over the last 20 years and bringing it up based on how inflation has rose over those years. Florida and Alabama both have thresholds of $25,000, and interestingly enough, that was the number that I just came up with before I even back-checked Florida and Alabama, but that seems to be kind of a sweet spot where your local true small business owners, your mom and pops, they would benefit the most if that threshold was $25,000. You're not helping the huge corporations then, you're helping the true small business owners in Georgia. I always like to use this laptop example when explaining tangible personal property tax. This is why I believe business owners are so frustrated with this tax. So when you purchase a laptop, for example, you pay sales tax at the time of purchase. And then you create your work that you're doing on the laptop. So as a public accountant, I'm preparing tax returns and financials and things of that nature on my laptop. And then I pay income tax on that work that I've created on it each year. And then every year I am paying TPP tax on the laptop. And then when I sell the laptop, I pay capital gains tax. So there is a lot of tax related to each asset that you purchase, with TPP tax being, again, the most frustrating one for small business owners. We've gone over some of the inconsistent reporting that goes on. Frequency of audits is another thing. Columbia County does do a great job of comparing their list of business licenses to who is turning in TPP tax returns, whereas other counties are not doing that. So if there could be some sort of way we could get everybody on the same page from the state level, that would be very helpful. Reporting requirements are something else that are inconsistent between counties. In Columbia County, we like to see a balance sheet turned in with the TPP tax return, and I've seen no other county that really asks for that. So consistency in what is being required would be great. What I'm asking that you would consider on this topic, I believe that a study committee needs to weigh the effect of the county's reduction in revenue compared to the savings for small business owners. And I asked my county to provide me with some numbers just so I could give you an example today. So in Columbia County, personal property accounts between $7,500 and $25,000 are bringing annual revenue to the county in the amount of about $157,000. That's on a $250 million budget. For a small business owner, you know, on average, my folks that I'm seeing are paying maybe $1,000 in TPP tax on a $600,000 to $1 million budget. So it would be interesting to actually do a study committee across more counties and compare what their revenue is compared to the burden on the small business owner to kind of see where that ends up. Again, this will be helpful for true small business owners, not large corporations, in between that $7,500 to $25,000 range. Just to give you some examples of items that are adjusted annually for inflation. So two-part request. One request is to do a one-time adjustment to bring the $7,500 up to $25,000. And then the second request would be to consider doing an annual inflation adjustment. So as the cost of this table rises, we need to adjust accordingly each year for that. And that's especially been true the past couple of years as we've seen inflation on the rise. Some items that are adjusted annually for inflation are the standard deduction, tax brackets, the annual exclusion for gifts and foreign earned income exclusion, and the earned income credit and credit for qualified adoption. So there are plenty of things that are being adjusted annually for inflation. So, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
This is a survey of our membership we did recently. Obviously, 96% of them pay tangible personal property tax. Here's the enlightening slide. Over 44% say it's a significant burden, or 46% say it's a moderate burden. I don't think anything should be burdensome, especially on our small businesses. And that is a significant number for us, and it was very enlightening to see, and it's sorely needed to be sorted out in some way. It's a very nuanced issue, and you're hearing from a county commissioner here, so you know that it's important. There's no legislation going through this year currently, but it's something we wanted to bring to the committee's attention to maybe get it on the board for this year, roundtables for discussion with our members, and hopefully bring something next year.
If I could add
Sure.
One more thing to the burden, not only is the tax itself burdensome, but it's just an additional engagement that most small business owners have to pay an accountant to prepare for them. Not that I don't appreciate the revenue, but, you know, it's something that also could be considered would be adding a checkbox onto the return itself that says my assets are under $7,500 or under $25,000, so I'm not going to fill out this return. That's done at the federal level for 990s, which is the nonprofit tax return that's filed each year. If your income's under a certain amount, you filed a postcard versus a full-on 990 tax return. So there are some examples there that we could look at to prevent the burden of filing the return itself and paying a preparer to do that.
Happy to answer any questions.
Well, we've got, the board is lit up again. Number 29, Chairman Tarvin.
Quickly, a couple of questions. What do you consider personal tangible? What is that? I mean, just a short version.
It is anything that's not tagged or that's not real property. So equipment that's tagged does not get taxed like this. A building doesn't get taxed, but a table, a computer, a sign out front, your point of sale system. I've been audited before by the county, and I was told to include my pencils on the
Okay.
return.
I saw inventory up there.
So, yes, so inventory is another item that is taxed under this TPP tax. And that has been a huge challenge, especially considering the supply chain issues, because you'll see a lot of small businesses
Okay,
ordering up.
is this in a retail setting? In a manufacturing setting, we're at Freeport.
Right, that's
State.
right, this is retail.
Okay, thank you so much.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Tarvin, that's also one of the inconsistencies we were discussing. A lot of counties we've heard are doing it differently. They are taxing a brand new wall that was constructed just to divide a particular part of a business. She said pencils, staplers. A lot of our small businesses are getting nickel and dimed.
So it'd be a capital gains tax instead of property tax. I mean,
You could keep naming
I'm
taxes.
talking about a capital investment, and if they're taxing you on capital investment, and probably your property taxes go up.
Sure, it's just
Thank
one more tax.
Cool. Number 23.
Mr. Chairman, this is a massive problem. I completely agree. The reason why it's so big in Northwest Georgia is a lot of counties that have these TPPs, they can just basically move their inventory right across state lines, and they don't have to pay that tax. And so my big question is, it's really a wealth tax. I mean, let's just be frank about what it is on small businesses. What is the best way to move counties away from the TPP? Because it's just going to get more disastrous when we're going to just see this wealth drain from our state. Thank you.
So something at the state level, the exclusion amount, it would truly be helpful if it was raised, because then they would not be paying tax on assets under a certain amount. 25,000 would be a great start, but I would love to see it well above 25,000.
I thought I had a quote. I forgot to put it in. It was on that exact scenario you just mentioned. Businesses are going out of the state because of this.
Cool. All right, Washburn, number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank both of you for your presentation. I'm assuming this revenue all goes to the individual counties. None of that passes through the state,
right.
correct?
That's right.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Does every county collect it, or is it optional?
I don't know that it's optional, but I do know that all counties are not collecting it. I don't know if it's the issues with their tax assessor's office, if they just don't have the manpower to follow up, if it's, Columbia County does put a big focus on it, so they're making sure they're collecting it. But like I said, our neighboring county is, business owners aren't even filing the return in McDuffie County.
One more, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Give me those numbers again for Columbia County, how much you collect.
157,000 between 7,500 and the 25,000, and that's on a $250 million budget. And then I'm seeing average of about $1,000 to $1,200 for my small business owners, with a budget between 600,000 to $1 million in sales each year. So it would be interesting to see how that is across the whole state.
Well, thank you again for bringing this. I think it's an excellent thing to present to have us think about.
Thank you.
And I commend you for asking for the study committee, and I hope that that can be done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. All right, Chairman Yurda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a retailer, I certainly understand this issue. As a former mayor, I understand the other side of that, but this is a burden on small businesses. There's no doubt about it. Small businesses create the majority of the jobs in the state of Georgia and the nation. And this would help small businesses. 25,000 is a minimum amount.
Right.
I would like to see it 100.
Me too.
Honestly, really to make a difference. It's fixtures, and inventory. And in my case, if I try to build my inventory up to serve my customers, to have a selection, I get penalized for that every year, and it's a burden. Normally I write the tax checks, but my wife had to do it this year. And she was shocked at what this tax costs us in our business. And we're a small business, I can tell you. But I commend you for bringing this forward. I've been thinking about it myself. It's something that would help small businesses, and I think it would be good to carry this forward.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. And number 2.
Then why can't we just eliminate it?
Great. That would be the count. I'm sure ACCG would have a. Yeah.
Who doesn't around here?
Yeah.
But why can't we just,
And that's why we wanted to bring it before you today. We wanted to work with the counties and to find the right solution that works best for the state. If I'm remembering correctly, it used to be the state's purview, but I think about a decade ago they put it into the hands of the county. But there's just inconsistencies in reporting. It's repetitive, so yes.
All right, and we've got, Representative Washburn.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. To follow up on Representative Schofield's question, which I think is a very pertinent question. In the issue of fairness, why should small business owners pay this tax to fund education, road maintenance, recreation, law enforcement, and all the other things that our private citizens need and deserve? But the idea that the small business should be hit with this tax to help pay for that is unfair. And I think we should look at the idea of eliminating it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I appreciate very much you bringing this to our attention. I've got a couple of questions. And the first one is $7,500. Is that a state-imposed minimum?
I believe it's consistent across the state, so I do believe it is a state-imposed minimum. And when I researched Florida and Alabama, their amounts are $25,000. That seemed to be a state-imposed minimum in those states as well.
Can you look into that for us, Hunter?
Sure.
And make sure that it's not something that may be done by the counties without the state. So we may want to address that.
Absolutely.
A couple of other things, and Chairman Tarvin spoke about this. He talked about in manufacturing, inventory is a free port. Is there any discussion or thoughts about changing inventory, retail operation to a Freeport type of?
So there's Freeport Exemption 1 and 2 that can be adopted by counties in the state of Georgia. Freeport Exemption 1 exempts your inventory from being taxed if you're a manufacturing company. Freeport Exemption 2 allows for any industry to exempt inventory, but the only county, I thought Columbia County had Freeport Exemption 2, but they do not. I think the only county that allows it is Paulding County, Freeport Exemption 2. The hesitation I guess I have with that is if you have Freeport Exemption 2, I don't know, I can look at it both ways, but you'll be flooded at that point with every business in the state wanting to come to your area, which it could be a pro or a con. So if only one county currently has adopted Freeport Exemption 2.
Great. And then the last thing, we were talking about personal property, and you used the example of the table.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do they consider the depreciated value of the table?
No, it's original cost. So, for example, when I started my small business, my grandmother gave me a desk that had been in our family for a long time, since the 20s, I think. And I had to go back to try to determine the original cost of that desk, and that's what is considered, that amount is what's taxed. It's not depreciated.
So when you discard the desk,
Mm-hmm.
are you still being paid a tax on it, or how does that work?
Well, when you discard the desk, on January 1st of the year that it's no longer in your possession, it no longer is reported. It's reported as sold on the TPP return, and you no longer pay tax on it. So it's what items are in your possession at January 1st is what you're going to be taxed on.
Good. Well, we appreciate you taking the time
Mm-hmm.
to bring this to our attention and traveling as far as you have. So thank you very, very
You're welcome.
much. Hunter, you've got some work to do.
Yes, sir, I do. And if I may, I would like to invite all of you to our Small Business Day tomorrow. We're partnering with the Independent Insurance Agents of America. We'll have a morning session at 10 a.m., but we will have members gathering beforehand. I know you guys gavel in typically at 10, but we will also have a lunch portion at noon over at the Department of Agriculture's meeting room, and we would love to have every single one of you, and we can continue this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate the presenters. You really brought some interesting facts to our attention, things that we need to work on to improve small business. We appreciate everyone attending, and of course our visitors. We thank you for being here. And again, I can't thank my members enough for making the effort to be here today. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.